perverted, disgusting, and weird. Okay, Felicia. For some reason, my wife takes pleasure in this slide. She thinks it's cool, but I think it's one of the most sick ones. Now, speaking of sickos, like my wife, this next slide shows you these four boys from Brooklyn who got a hold of these booklets and were inspired by them in the 1950s. These were Jewish teenager, juvenile delinquent neo-Nazis. Did you follow all that? And they were terrorizing Brooklyn in the 50s. They were grabbing young girls in the park and whipping them with whips being held up by the DA here. This whip was ordered from the back page of a comic book. Here's the headline, horsewhip used to flog two girls. And these were 8-column headlines throughout all the New York papers. It was written up in Life, Look, Collier's, all the major news media at the time covered this story. It was like the Columbine of its time. And they owed it all to Joe Shuster's Nights of Horror booklets. They were inspired by the scenes. They acted them out as we're going to be acting them out today. But they took the worst parts of them. And they eventually went to prison for their crimes. And here, because their crime, next slide please, was also, in addition to flogging girls, was murdering bums. And this is one of the bodies they fished out of the river, that they had the young boys in this kind of bizarre kind of way they did in the 50s. The police and detectives are all gathered around as the boys point out their crime. So it was a horrible thing that these four young men called the Brooklyn Thrill Killers. They sported Hitler mustaches, said Sieg Heil and Heil Hitler during the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag at school, and they were just like a really troublesome lot. But the next slide shows what the government did. Not only did they put these kids behind bars, but they tried to find out who was behind doing these booklets. And they raided this horror bookshop, print shop in Brooklyn. The owner of the shop, his sister-in-law turned him in after she read about the Brooklyn Thrill Killers being inspired by these books. And then there was after that there was a Senate investigation. Senator Kefauver, who was wanting to be president, was getting all kinds of Senate investigations together. He was from Tennessee, and he liked to wear to his campaigns a coonskin cap. So he put together a Senate investigation about juvenile delinquency, comic books, and pornography. And one of his star witnesses was this fella. Get ready to boo again.
Boo.
The next fella, Dr. Frederick Wertham, who he was the guy behind the Comics Code in the 1950s that put a lot of comic book companies out of business. But he had interviewed the head of the Brooklyn Thrill Killers in his jail cell, and he was the one that found out that the Brooklyn Thrill Killers were inspired by the Nights of Horror booklets. And they brought before the Senate Edward Eddie Mishkin, a Jewish mobster who ran 5 or 6 sleazy bookstores in Times Square, and he was probably the money guy behind the printing of the booklets. So I want to show you one last slide here. This is the cover of the book, and also the introduction to a 1-minute but fast-paced but furious and funny, I think, little animation my wife Clecia did on the book. So take it away, Clecia, with your animation. thank you so much for coming out today. I'm excited to have the real talent come on now and do some modeling that we're all going to be inspired by. And she's been inspired by the book. I think it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun. And I think we owe it all to Molly, who had the vision for this and put it all together. I like to give her a big hand.